All right, we are now on a series of mitzvahs that have to do with the service in the Mishkan, and as I've mentioned numerous times, the interesting thing about these mitzvahs are that they have so little to do with us on a practical implementation level, even if the base of English was standing, because these are all limited to the Kohanim. Yet they are enumerated in the 613. And that means that we have to try to figure out what the mitzvah is speaking to us, because the Torah is speaking. That the Torah is from an expression that the Zohar says. The word. Anybody know what the word Torah comes from? What's the word Torah related to?
Instructions.
Very good. Hora'ah, which is teaching. Torah comes from hora'ah. Hora'ah is the concept of educating. Moreh is a teacher, and is also one that gives you direction, and that's what the Torah is for. So the Torah is not there. I mean, even if you look at the book of Bereshis, there are only 3 mitzvahs in the entire book of Bereshis. So what do you need all the stories for? What do you need all the stories for in Bereshis? Avram Avinu and Yitzchak and Yaakov and Adam. The answer is that the Torah is teaching you how to human behavior from start to finish. If you see the commentaries, go to town on every little thing that happens over there. The Torah is teaching you there are things to be learned over here. There's a lesson to be learned. So certainly in the base of Mikdash, which is structured a certain way, and the Mishkan, the tabernacle, and the service that takes place there, there's something we're supposed to learn from it, because ultimately every one of us is a Kohen who is serving in the tabernacle. Each one of us is a Mishkan. Each one of us is trying to serve our Kodesh Baruch Hu. So the mitzvah over here is that the service of the day in the Mishkan begins with removing a pan full of the ashes from the top of the Mizbeach. You go up to the Mizbeach. Now the sacrifice has been burning overnight. So you got sacrifices that they put on the altar. So what do you do after the sacrifice burned down? You got ashes. So they left the ashes in a heap on the altar, and that heap of ashes is called a tapuach. You ever hear that idea, tapuach? Because the word tapuach in Hebrew, which means what?
Swallow.
I mean, what's that?
Swallow.
Tapuach.
Puffed up.
Puffed up. Very good. Tapuach. So if you say to anybody living in Israel, what's a tapuach? A tapuach is an apple. The reason they call it tapuach is because it's puffed up. The word tafuach means to be blown up, to be inflated. So the heap of ashes on the mizbeach is called a tapuach, and the reason that the tapuach was left there is because the bigger that heap became, there was a credit to the Jewish people. That shows devotion, that we were burning offerings to God, we were bringing sacrifices to God in the base of Mikdash. So that thing is called the tapuach. As a matter of fact, I once heard a very interesting explanation. Why do we dip the apple in honey on Rosh Hashanah? You ever hear an idea? Why do we dip the apple in honey? Wanted to be a sweet year, so why an apple? Why an apple? Why an apple in honey? Why an apple? So I heard 2 explanations. The first explanation is the standard one, that what we're asking for in the coming year is there are always 3 areas of life that we're asking God for benefit, which is Bane, Chaye, Umezone. Bane means children, family life. Chaye means health. Bane Chaye means health, physical health, life itself. And Mezone means Parnasa. We're always, anything you ask for fits one of those categories, either children and family structure, whether to have children, or that the children should be healthy, or the children should be productive, they should follow your path. Chaye means life, they should be healthy, they should live a long life. And Mezone means Parnasa. Mezone means Parnasa. I mean, much of what we daven for in our life is always surrounding Parnasa. So an apple has 3 features to it. Feature number 1 is that it looks good. It's always the classic, wow, a nice shiny red apple. It smells good. An apple orchard has a very very strong fragrance, and it tastes good. If you're an apple person, it tastes good. So because it has those 3 characteristics, symbolically, those correspond to the 3 areas where we're asking for prosperity and good in the coming year. And therefore we dip it in honey, because honey is sweet, and you want to show you a sweet year. That was one of the ideas I heard. There's another idea which I heard, which I saw in a book. It's a very interesting idea. You see, when Avram Avinu, let's back up for a second. What event are we constantly calling into play on Rosh Hashanah? We're constantly reminding of a certain event. Does anybody know what it is? The Akedah, exactly. The offering of Yitzchak, the sacrifice of Isaac. And that becomes a merit for the Jewish people. That's something that we always call into our merit. Please God, remember what Avram Avinu did, his devotion, and so on and so forth. Now, let's say Avraham Avinu had not been stopped at the last minute, God wouldn't have said, don't sacrifice Isaac. What would have happened to Isaac? Avraham Avinu takes him up there. What would have happened to him had God not stopped him? It would have been sacrificed, right? Okay, he would have shechted him, then what would have happened? It would have burned him. It would have shechted him. We would have done with him the same that you do with any other offering. You skin him, you cut him into pieces, then you burn him. And what would he turn into? He would turn into a heap of ashes, which is called what? The tapuach. So on Rosh Hashanah, we dip the apple into the apple, which is called tapuach. Symbolically, we dip it in. That Yitzchak's fate was sweetened at the last minute. Yitzchak's fate was sweetened at the last minute, and symbolically, that's the connection between the apple specifically, which is a very nice reason. Again, none of this is all custom. So it's not a deoraisa, it's a custom. But it's a very interesting reason for that custom. So the service in the Beis Hamikdash began with the Kohen going up to the top of the altar. He would take a pan full of ashes, and he would take it and place it at the base of the altar. That started the offering of the day. You go up there, you take a pan full of ashes, and he would place it on the floor right by the base of the mizbeach. That's the first service in the Beis Hamikdash. Anybody have an idea what that symbolizes? What's the idea? There's obviously symbolism. All of the service and all the utensils in the Beis Hamikdash. The whole thing has got depth of symbolism. If you ever want to read up on it, I would recommend reading Rav Hirsch, starting in Parshas Truma and Tetzaveh in the book of Shmos. If you want to see fascinating insights into what the utensils of the Mishkan represent, it's remarkable, the depth of the Aron Kodesh and the way they're built and exactly what the structures are. For example, the Aron Kodesh is the dimensions of the Aron Kodesh are 2.5 amas long by 1.5 amas wide and 1.5 amas high. And Rav Hirsch points out it's the only utensil in the Beis Hamikdash that has broken dimensions. The only other broken dimension we find anywhere in the utensils is on the table, the shulchan, where they have the showbread, which is 2 by 1 by 1.5 high. That height dimension of the shulchan is the only other fractional dimension. All other dimensions in the Mishkan, whether it's the courtyard, the what do you call it, the poles, the menorah, the Mizbeach HaKetoris, all of them have full dimensions. The only one that has a broken dimension is the Aron Kodesh, and that's in all three directions. And the Shulchan has a broken dimension upward, which obviously it's got to be a reason. It wasn't just like randomly chosen. Anybody have a guess what that represents? So you see, each one of the utensils symbolizes something. What do you think the Aron Kodesh symbolizes? The Aron Kodesh symbolizes Torah. And what we're supposed to remind ourselves is that no matter how much Torah we study, there's always more to study. Whether by the depth of Torah, the length, depth, breadth, height of Torah, no matter how much Torah you've studied, it's endless. Torah is called a sea. Torah is it's called the sea of Talmud. You jump into the sea of Talmud and start swimming. And the more you swim, the more you see there's another depth. I just read an article now that they know so little about they know almost as little about the ocean as they do about outer space. They have gotten, to get down there, they're discovering lakes in the ocean, and they're discovering all sorts of weird stuff down there, which they have no idea. They had all sorts of sea creatures they keep discovering. They don't know what's going on there. That's what the Talmud is. The deeper you go into it, the more you see that there's something to learn. And that's why the person who realizes how big it is the person who studies it most, not least. When you know very little about it, you see the surface of the lake. That's the lake. Then when you start diving into the lake, you realize how vast it really is. The deeper you go, the more vast it becomes. That's the nature of Talmud. So the Aron Kodesh represents Torah, is to tell us that no matter how much Torah you've learned, you are a half dimension. No matter which dimension you go to, you're incomplete. You could learn more breadth. There's more information. There's more depth to penetrate to because it's endless. That's the broken dimensions in the Aron Kodesh. The other thing is the Aron Kodesh is made of three. The ark. I'm going to use this as an example. The ark is made of 3 boxes. You've ever seen that idea? You have the ark itself, which is made out of wood, and it's coated with gold on the outside and on the inside. But that golden coating, when the Torah says coat it with gold, it doesn't mean gold the way we would normally coat something. It doesn't mean take a coat of gold and paint it. It means that there's an inner box, which is gold, an outer box, which is gold, and the inner box goes inside the wooden box, which is the actual Aron Kodesh, and then it goes into, it's like one of those toys they have for kids. You put one box into another box. That's the Aron Kodesh. The gold on the inside, and wood Wood is the actual box. And what is the idea? What's the symbolism? What's the symbolism? So obviously, wood represents something that grows. And the Torah is teaching you that we are meant to grow with Torah constantly. That's the Aron Kodesh. And we have to become gold on the inside and gold on the outside. That means in our internal service of God, we have to be gold. In our heart, in our devotions, and externally in our actions, we have to be gold. You see, there's always a symbolism. There's a tremendous amount of symbolism. Now, just remarkably, the only other broken dimension is by the shulchan, the height dimension of the table. You know why? Because the shulchan represents prosperity. The shulchan has the showbread on it. The showbread is where the blessing for financial prosperity comes from. So the shulchan symbol is the symbol of the shulchan is that on the one hand, the Jew has to see himself when it comes to the length and width dimension, which is the dimension down here. Those are full dimensions, 2 by 1. My own personal worldly needs, I should see myself as being satisfied with what I have. I should have enough. My attitude should be whatever I have is enough. But on the height dimension, which represents your spending on mitzvahs and your spending on devotion to God, you should always see yourself as being able to do a little bit more. I remember once I was in America, it was Sukkot, I was davening in this shul. It was officially an Orthodox shul, but most of the constituents were not Torah observant. And there were these two brothers who were major purchasers for a department store chain. Both of them were millionaires. And I was sitting there in shul, and I had my lulav and my esrog and I had my fire with Sukkot. And they didn't have one. They happened to come to shul, just they drove to shul on Yom Tov, they davened, and that's it for them. So I'm sitting there in shul, and the guy says to me, "Hey, Dave, how much did that set cost you?" So I said, "Well, $39. He goes, "It's pretty steep." Right? I remember thinking to myself, this is a guy who pays $39 for the appetizer in the restaurants that he eats at. And I was thinking to myself, well, considering that I use it every day for 6 days, that means I get a mitzvah every day for 6 days, that's $6 for the mitzvah, that's not so steep. And this guy, just remember him whistling, "Ooh, boy, that's steep." Tell somebody how much tefillin costs. Well, tefillin costs, costs you $800, $1,000. That's a lot for little black boxes. Yeah, I've seen people who carry around little black boxes that they've paid more for. It could be an iPod, and it could be a laptop, and it could be it could be video recorder, whatever it is that whatever chazarai people have. It costs an awful lot. So it's only a question of perspective. It's a question of is it important to you or not? That's the idea of the symbolism over here. That everything in the Mishkan has some depth of symbolism. What would you guess is the symbolism? Taking a pan full of ashes and putting it on the floor. Pretty wild, yeah. Well, pretty abstract. What could it be?
If the pile of ashes is to kind of give us, I don't know, what was the word you used? I'm gonna say like a good name, like to show
good.
To show that we're doing that.
Right.
If you just it's kind of like taking it away and saying we're good, but it's not all
interesting, very good. So one of the ideas, that's the second idea, very good. The first idea is that we receive from God, Mida Keneged Mida. We receive from God, depending on how devoted we are, that's how God pays us back. So what we're doing is we're taking the ashes and putting it on the floor, symbolizing that we want the influence of this devotion on the altar to come down on the floor, meaning symbolically that we should receive the flow of divine energy that should come down to our world over here in exchange for our devotions. That, in other words, to show that we believe that all of our blessing comes from God, and we would like it to come down here. That's idea number one. Idea number two is the Torah is teaching you that, this shows that this is a sign of beauty. The ashes are a sign of beauty. The Torah says, you know what? There's a very big danger over here. Don't let it go to your head. Take those ashes and put it on the floor. Yeah, you're doing well. Yeah, you're doing. Let's keep it in the proper perspective here. Put them on the floor. The floor always shows a sign of humility. Take it on the floor. Yeah, we're devoted, and you know what? Just don't think you've never made it in Judaism, right? That's part of that's what sometimes people find a little bit challenging about this religion. No matter how good you are, it's always like, well, you could be doing better. I mean, that's always. Can you imagine it saying to your wife or saying it to your kids, well, the supper was good, could have been a little bit better. You don't do that. We don't do it with human beings. Human beings say, you're doing great. You're doing great. But our attitude is, yes, I am doing great. I am doing great. You're doing great. You're doing great. You're doing great. Just because I'm doing great doesn't mean I can't be greater. and I always have to strive for more. It doesn't mean you're coming up short. There's a difference between, well, you're coming up short. There's a difference between coming up short and trying to improve. The best player in the league still tries to improve his game. You're the best player in the league. You can't expect more from you. Nobody expects more from you. If you would only continue this way, we'd also say you're great. But a Torah Jew, yeah, you are great. Now be even more. Keep trying to break through and create new levels for yourself. The nature of Torah, do you remember there used to be a game, you guys know more about this than I do, there's something called the Game Boys. Did you guys have Game Boys growing up? I don't know if that was outdated already. My kids had Game Boys. I didn't like the Game Boys. I couldn't stand the Game Boy. First of all, I wasn't good at it. Anything the kids are better than it drove me. It's like I got dizzy from it, looking at that thing. So they had this one game called Mario. Remember Mario? Mario with World, this little Italian kid, Mario. And so one day I'm fiddling around with the Game Boy, and I'm never doing very well. And all of a sudden, he goes through a door, and I hear, so I called my son over. I said, come here. My son was about 9 years old. I said, come here, what just happened? What just happened? He said to me, well, you got through it. Because I thought, I won, and now I'm going to get an award from the president or something, because this is the far, I said, what just happened? What just happened? So my son comes over and he says, oh, you just finished the first level. I said to him, well, how many levels are there? He says, 15. Then he looks at me and goes, is this the first time you finished the first level? I think after I never picked it up again. That was as humiliating as it gets to have your kids say that. I said, forget it, I can't do this. Now, the truth is, the next level, I think he was underwater or something. Then he's in outer space. I never even saw all the levels. All I say he's going from one level to another. And I realized that's what Torah is. When you study Torah, just when you think, okay, I know all about it, all of a sudden you crack through and a new level opens up. Sometimes it could happen to you in davening. I'm davening. I think, well, I had kavanah. Also, one day you really connect. You go, whoa, where was I just now? Wow, that was good. Then you realize that, hey, there's another level over there which I never even knew. There's a Mario called worlds, right? There are worlds in Gemara. We just learned the Gemara today. So you learn the Gemara, then you learn Tosfos. Whoa, there's a whole dimension here that exists. And it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. That's the nature of service. That's what makes you understand what prophecy is. What's a prophet? Somebody who's got prophecy. Do you know when a person experiences prophecy, they might have experienced it once in their lifetime? And when they experience prophecy, all other pleasures, the intensity of the pleasure of prophecy was such that the entire rest of their life, all they did was spend trying to regain that prophecy. If I had to compare it to anything, I would compare it to drugs. Where somebody has, try to explain drugs to somebody. What's heroin like? People say, wait, I wonder what heroin is like. Well, it's like marshmallow fluff, but a little different. How can you possibly explain that to somebody? What's it like? So if a person experiences it, they talk about heroin addicts who when they wean. I had a guy in my neighborhood who told his wife, the guy was a difficult husband. His wife told him he was a Baal Tshuva. And his wife told me that the guy, not his wife had told somebody else. The other guy told me this guy was a drug addict, and he'd been off of drugs for 20 or 30 or whatever it was, but he never found anything to replace it. He was always living with the frustration of not being able to get that high that he got. And that's what prophecy is. So sometimes it happens to you that when you're davening, all of a sudden you actually connect with something that you can't even identify, you can't even touch it. You just realize, ooh, there's something real over there. I don't know where I was just now, but I just contacted something that was very, very real, what we call eternity. You just contacted it. That's the way it is by all mitzvahs. So the Torah is saying to you, listen, it's beautiful. The tapuach on top of the altar is truly beautiful. Take some of the pan and put it on the floor to remind yourself, don't get full of yourself just yet. It carries over to other areas of life. Sometimes there are certain times of life where you have to behave with a certain dignity. You may dress up to go to a wedding, and you may dress up for a business interview, and you're pretty, you're in uniform for the first time, and you're really impressed with yourself. Try to keep it the proper perspective. I heard once, did you ever have Rabbi Pincus, Rabbi Shimshon Pincus? Rabbi Shimshon Pincus was one of the leading speakers in the Torah world who was unfortunately was killed in a car accident at a relatively young age. And somebody said, in the shul, somebody told me that he used to go all over Israel lecturing. When he would come to the shul, this guy who was one of the gaboim of the shul, he noticed that anytime Rabbi Pinkus came to the shul, when he would go into the bathroom, he saw the bathroom was completely clean. There were no tissues on the floor. You ever seen shul bathrooms? They sometimes leave something to be desired. And there were no tissues on the floor. Everything was wiped up. And he never, and then it suddenly hit him that every time Rabbi Pinkus was invited to come, so then the shul bathroom would get cleaned up. And he didn't know what he figured that the other Gaboim, in honor of Rabbi Pinkus, they were cleaning it up, so in case he has to go to the bathroom, then it turned out that's not what happened. Rabbi Pinkus, before ascending the podium, he would go into the bathroom and he would clean up the bathroom, so that he should remind himself, because he ascends the podium, so there might be a little honor, prestige, he might go to his head a little bit. So first thing he did was something to humble himself, because he would go into the bathroom and he would clean up the bathroom in order to make sure that it doesn't get carried away with himself. So that's the lesson of the Torah over here, that a person should try to keep things in the proper perspective. Okay. The next mitzvah is to put wood on the fire in the morning and in the afternoon. Now, that means that they had a woodshed in the Beis Hamikdash. They would take wood out of this woodshed. Kohanim, who could not serve in the Beis Hamikdash or in the Mishkan, what disqualifies a Kohen? There's a whole list of physical blemishes where a Kohen is disqualified. Among them is being left-handed. A Kohen who's left-handed cannot serve in the Beis Hamikdash. One of the reasons is that you want uniformity. You never have a military formation where everybody's got the rifle on their right shoulder and one guy's got it on the left shoulder. It's supposed to be uniform and nothing should be odd. Now, there are obviously physical abnormalities which are listed where a guy's completely physically abnormal, but there are other qualifications. In a Kohen, he could be bow-legged or other minor physical. I wouldn't even call them bow-legged. Bow-leggedness is often a sign of a good athlete. Good athletes are often bow-legged. It gives a person a certain speed, a certain advantage. But the Beis Hamikdash, it doesn't qualify. So there are certain abnormalities where you're not welcome into serving the Beis Hamikdash. These Kohanim would then serve in the woodshed. My first nephew, when he was born, so at about 2 years old, maybe 1.5, they started noticing that he's left-handed. We're Kohanim. So they noticed the kid was doing everything with his left hand. So I suggested to my sister-in-law that we should tie his arm behind his back so he'll get used to using his right hand so he won't be disqualified to serve in the Beis Hamikdash. So she just suggested tying my arm behind my back, and that's how the conversation ended. So a Kohen who has some sort of physical disability, so he's not allowed in the Beis. So what did he do instead? Where did they put them? They were in the woodshed, and they would take worms out of the wood so that the wood could then be burnt on the altar, and they could burn it without any of the worms, because the wood gets something to get rotting, and the rotting carries worms. Now, interestingly enough, after the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, they hid the Beis Hamikdash, they hid the ark. And there's a Mishnah. This is actually a Mishnah. It's not even an obscure medrash. It's a Mishnah that says there were 2 Kohanim that were once in the woodshed, and there had been rumors circulating that the ark was hidden somewhere down in the beneath the woodshed in the Beis Hamikdash. Apparently there were there were caves. There's another word for caves, something with a C. Caverns, that's what it was. Caverns. There were caverns down beneath the woodshed where the Aron Kodesh was hidden. That was a rumor circulating. Now, 2 of the Kohanim were once in the woodshed, and one of them noticed some subtle change in the floorboarding or in the stone, the way the floor was laid out. And he mentioned it to a friend. He was going to show him where it was, and before he could finish the sentence, he died on the spot. So the Mishnah says that confirmed the rumor that the Aron Kodesh was buried under the woodshed, and that HaKadosh Baruch Hu did not want it to be found. That's a Mishnah in Tractate Shkolim. So the Kohanim would work in the woodshed. Now, what was the woodshed? Contained wood, and the wood would be brought and placed on the Mishkan in the morning. Some wood would be put on the fire in the morning, and some in the afternoon. What's curious about this mitzvah is what? So the mitzvah is to put the wood onto the altar, but what's curious about that? What's curious is that the fire comes down from heaven. The fire came down from heaven, so what do you need the human end of it for? Why do you need to put wood on the fire? The fire was a divine fire anyway.
You gotta do your part.
You gotta do your part. That's the lesson. You gotta do your part.
The Eish HaTamid, what's the word?
The Eish Tamid Tukal HaMizbeach Lo Sichbeh, the constant fire on the altar. And what do you call it? In the first Beis Hamikdash, the fire was shaped like a lion. Pretty impressive. The fire is shaped like a lion. In the second base of English, when there was a drop in the spiritual level of people, the fire was shaped like a dog. And there's no question that there's a symbol. On the one hand, it's a fire. On the other hand, it's a dog. A dog is always a symbol of some sort of low creature, which means that the spiritual level had dropped. Now, what's interesting here is there are two aspects. Number one, there's the idea of hiding a miracle as much as possible. So people ask, why did God make Noah build an ark? The ark anyway wasn't big enough to hold all of the wildlife in the world. I once spoke to my brother who was going to become a zoologist, and I asked him, how many species? There are two opinions of how you counted the species. In other words, Noah brought in, what did he bring in? Did he bring in 2 dogs? Or did he bring in 2 collies, 2 German shepherds, 2 cocker spaniels, right? What did he bring in? Were there species or subspecies? And my brother told me, even if it was only the species alone, there would still not have been room in the ark to hold them. Hippopotamuses are big, hippopotami, and then you need all the food for them for a year. Now, hippopotami, I think, consume, if I'm not mistaken, 300 pounds of food a day, something like that. Just a vast amount. Elephants, lions, there's just not enough food for them in the ark. The whole thing's a miracle. The whole thing's a miracle. So why not do that? Why not just have Noah float up in the air and let the world get flooded in a minute, just flush it down, and have them put it back down on a dry earth? He could have. God could do anything. The answer is that even when God does a miracle, God wants the miracle to be hidden in nature as much as possible. Do as much as you can, and I'll do the rest. That is the Torah's attitude. The Torah says, you do your part. You do your part. Let HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's the same thing when it comes to here. Yeah, there's going to be fire coming down from heaven. Put the wood on the way. Put in, number one, disguise the miracle. Number two, we want you to make an effort. Now, I'll tell you something fascinating. Have you heard of Rabbi Dessler? You've heard of Rabbi Dessler, right? Michtav Me'Eliyahu, he wrote the famous Michtav of Rabbi Dessler, who started the whole Gateshead community and the Gateshead call. In 1940, Rabbi Dessler had gone from Europe to England because he'd gone a little earlier because his family didn't have money in Europe. So he went from the continent, he went to England to become a rabbi there. That was in about maybe 1937, 38, something like that. World War I broke out. He was separated from his wife and children. So his wife and daughter ended up in Australia with the English nationals. They went from Lithuania to Australia, and his son ended up in Cleveland. Rabbi Dessler in 1940, he was separated from his family for about 5 years, 6 years. In 1940, Rabbi Dessler got a letter from somebody named Rabbi David Dryan. Rabbi David Dryan was the shochet of the Gateshead community. You ever heard of the Gateshead Yeshiva? The big Gateshead community in the north of England? So, I don't know if you've ever been up in Gateshead. Gateshead is a little tiny dot on the map, which became one of the major Torah centers of Europe. I've been in Gateshead twice. It's just a little insignificant town up in England, but it's got a strong Jewish community. So what happened was this Rabbi David Dryan just came up with an idea that he wants to start a kollel in Gateshead. So he sent out letters to 22 rabbis asking them if they'd like to take on this project. 18 of the rabbis didn't bother answering. It was ludicrous. 3 of the rabbis wrote back, it might be a good idea, but in case you haven't heard, there's a world war going on, and we're not going to be able to get the funding together for this kollel. Rav Dessler got the letter, and he said, great idea, let's go. And Rav Dessler then, with almost superhuman, he just made the effort, and one thing led to another, and it got started. And there he was, and Gateshead is on the map. Rabbi Aaron Cutler did the same thing when he came to America. Rabbi Aaron Cutler came to America, decided he was going to start the Lakewood Yeshiva. People said to him, you're crazy, you're out of your mind, it's not going to work. And Rabbi Aaron Cutler now has all of Lakewood and all the offshoots of Lakewood. The Panovich Rav came to Israel from Panovich, lost his family in the war, his entire community was wiped out. He decided to build the Panovich Yeshiva in Bnei Brak. In Israel at the time, there were probably 200 boys that you would call Yeshiva Bachrim. And he goes and he buys this plot of land in Bnei Brak. People said to him, you're dreaming. He said, I may be dreaming, but at least I'm not sleeping. Right? And he goes and he builds this plot of land up there in Panovich. And when he built the yeshiva, he built an entrance where 500 or 600 boys could go. And you ever been to the Panovich yeshiva? It's like a big balcony. You just walk in. He said, what are you thinking, man? He didn't even put in doors. He just put an entrance where the boys could flow in and out. He said, what are you thinking? And now it's there. Because our job is, don't think about it logically. Just do what you have to do. Let it coach, because anyway, we're not responsible for the results. As you get older in life, you'll find that many of the things that you succeeded in life probably had nothing to do with you. You succeeded in spite of yourself, not because of yourself. Most of the things that you succeeded at didn't make any sense at all, came from left field. And the things that you really thought you were good at, you messed up. And so the Panovich Rav, all these people, they made the effort. The Panovich Rav actually went to a very wealthy man. He said, I want to, can I get soliciting donations. He said, can you give me help me out? So the guy says, yeah, I'll give you $10,000 on one condition, that the students in your institution don't wear yarmulkes. Well, he was not happy about it. So Panovich Rav said, okay. He took the money, he opened up the first girls' school in Bnei Brak. Huh? Yeah, there you go. Okay, and then and the Panovich Rav and Rav Dessler also. It was ridiculous. It was completely not within the realm of natural achievement. But there are a lot of things in life are like that. Do what you can. Just do what you can. Let HaKadosh Baruch Hu take care of us. That's the first lesson over here. Okay. Now there's one more mitzvah today. I'm skipping the next one. Okay, this no, not that. Here we go. This is mitzvah 136, and this is the mitzvah for the Kohen Gadol to bring an offering, a meal offering. Half he brings in the morning, and half he brings in the afternoon. The Kohen Gadol has a personal offering that he has to bring. It's a meal offering. He brings half the offering in the morning and half the offering in the morning. Now this is a very fascinating mitzvah because it has broad ramifications. What's the idea of a meal offering? Who brings a meal offering? Remember we spoke about the different types of sacrifices. Who brings a meal offering? A poor man. Somebody who can't afford more brings a meal offering. So, a what? A mincha. Now, why would the Kohen Gadol bring a meal offering? What's the idea of a Kohen Gadol bringing a meal offering, if that's what a poor man brings?
To humble him?
Number one, to humble the Kohen Gadol. To humble the Kohen Gadol, exactly correct. Number two?
To humble the poor man, to show that he's not to be ashamed.
Yes, that the poor, very good. That the poor man shouldn't be ashamed to bring if a poor man comes to the Beis Hamikdash, he's embarrassed to bring his korban. Hey, what are you embarrassed about? Even the Kohen Gadol brings that offering. So any of the pompous guys who are bringing wealthy offerings, and they're making a big show of it, the poor man feels bad. But here, the poor man equals the Kohen Gadol. The Kohen Gadol, hey, he brings the poor offerings. I got nothing to be embarrassed about. One of the ideas is that the Kohen Gadol should show that he himself, it humbles the Kohen Gadol. I mean, Kohen Gadol is with all the, what do you call it? And he looks very, very high. He's wearing the chest plate. And it's the position of honor and glory. On the other hand, keep it humble. You're bringing a poor man sacrifice. In addition to that, the poor man isn't embarrassed to bring his offering because the poor man realizes that, well, if the Kohen Gadol is bringing it and he's not embarrassed, I could bring it too. That's a very, very big advantage in life. Sometimes they give a guy a feeling, well, if he could do it, I could do it also. So it helps you to get over the hump. They have in the United States, they have the rabbis passed a various rules and limits for making weddings. Because people are running into a problem. You make a wedding, you spend a tremendous amount of money. Like somebody said, how could something that costs $70,000 be so short-lived? And $70,000 is $70,000 a drop in the bucket today. So the rabbis passed a rule in the United States in the religious community that these are the recommendations for the weddings. Now, in the Hasidic communities, they're very, very rigid about it. And for example, the Ger Hasidim have rules. You're allowed 200 guests or 300 guests, whatever it is. They have very strict limits because that takes the pressure off the people who can't afford it. So, even if you could afford it, this is the limit. That way nobody has to feel bad. Everybody makes the same standardized wedding. So they had one very wealthy chassid came to the Ger Rebbe, and he said to Ger Rebbe, I have the means and I could afford it. Is it okay if I make could I make a more extravagant wedding, because I could afford to pay for it? So the Rebbe looked at him and says, if you could afford to pay for it, so go buy yourself a new Rebbe. And so he got the message. Right. In other words, this is for the benefit of everybody. Now, in the United States, they made these rules on limitations, And not everybody has to abide by it. But what it does is it allows the person who really can't afford it to say, the reason I'm making this type of wedding is because the rabbi recommended this. So it gives you a way out. It gives you a dignified way out. The other thing is that a wealthy man who goes and does that is doing a tremendous mitzvah. A wealthy man who makes a modest wedding is a tremendous mitzvah, because that always allows the poor people to say, well, listen, I got nothing to be ashamed of. Even Plony, who everybody knows has all the money, made a very modest wedding. And the more modest you are with your money, the more beneficial it is, because there's a lot of financial pressure people have, especially when you're making a wedding and you're going on display. So the idea of the what do you call it is that the Kohen Gadol should allow the poor man to try to at least match him so the poor man can maintain his dignity. Okay.